In today's video, you will not see I paint and weathering guns, remove tiny bolts from the sprue and glue them on the model, apply water slide decals upside down, and few more details and mistakes that I removed. Hello fellow modelers! What a surprise! Another 35 scale tank. It is not my preferable scale, but I got a few kits in the scale from fellow modeler Oliver. Coincidentally, I watched Valley of the Years HBO miniseries recently, so I wanted to build this highly modified Centurion tank and have it in my collection. The kit is quite comprehensive and has a tons of parts, but the interior is empty. I had a lot of free time during Christmas holidays, so I wanted to assemble something like that. As you can see, some parts are greasy from oil, so I recommend cleaning them with a soapy water before painting. Anyway, the parts have lovely details and textures. Included are some metal parts. The fabric tow rope I will replace for metal one, it will be better, slightly. The instruction manual is relatively straightforward, but I recommend marking the completed steps, otherwise you will miss some small parts. I am removing parts from the sprue with a sharp side cutters, but I need to clean residual plastic like mold lines or runners as well. And I use for this purpose soft metal or nail files. There is active gear, but I instead fix it at a static position with a glue. I glue plastic with a few types of adhesives, primarily with super thin glue, because it evaporates on air fast and creates strong bond. There are rubber parts that I need to glue on plastic. For this purpose I use extra thin super glue. The last material is metal. For this purpose I use super glue as well. The super thin glue for plastic is good, but if you need to apply sometimes glue first, then it's better to use some denser contact glue. I personally like Revell or Gamma. If you are painstaking, you can find many sink marks on the plastic parts, then you can fill with a putty. Also, I wouldn't say I like these plastic ejector pin marks on fenders. I am cutting them out with a side cutters and cleaning the rest with nail files. You can also notice the soft line along the entire length. We want nice models, so do not forget to remove them. This Centurion tank has many versions, thus the kit is also prepared for different modifications. Especially the Israeli one is quite complex, so you need to carefully follow instruction manual and fill unused holes or modify parts a little bit. The turret on the original tank was cast from one part, so there cannot be any seam line. I am filling it with a Tamiya grey putty, but you can use super glue as well. After sanding, I partly destroyed the lovely rough texture. So what now? Let's try to recreate it. You can use some primer, but for my 72 scale kits I usually use mix of Tamiya grey putty and leveling thinner. I am mixing all these components together and applying the putty on the model surface with a black foam. Try not to spread the putty and rather steeping it. You do not need to worry about parts around, because you can easily wipe excess putty with a Tamiya lacquer thinner. I am twisting tow rope. You only need 3 wires and attach one end to the drill, and then turn it on, slowly. The advantage of many AFV models is that you can assemble almost the whole kit and then paint it. All these parts are additional parts for Israeli version. You hardly recognize that it was British Centurion at first. The whole tank looks different and more interesting. I primarily like additional armor and rough look. Okay, that was assembling, but the funny part is painting, at least for me. I have here new brown primer from Mr. Color. I usually use black or grey, but this brown is good for sand camouflages. It has very dense consistency, so I pre-dilute the whole bottle for future models. It will save some time. The bottles you can buy from eBay or AliExpress or so. I use for dilution leveling thinner that contains paint retarder. It means that prolongs drying time, and thus the layer is lovely smooth without orange peel texture. I have 0.4mm nozzle, and the dilution ratio is in this case 1 part of a primer and 2.5 parts of a thinner. And if you have a smaller nozzle, you need to add even more thinner. I use a cheap airbrush, Fengda BD 130, because primers are difficult for cleaning. The primer revealed a lot of imperfections, which I hardly see before. I have from AK real color set including colors for Israeli forces. They are similar in composition to acrylic Tamiya or Hudba colors. The color has very dense consistency, so you need to add a lot of thinner again. You can use original real color thinner, but I used this time Tamiya lacquer thinner. The result is excellent as well. You can spray the whole model only with one color, but you can try something more interesting, and that is shading and highlights. You can, for example, imagine that it is not a 3D model and you have only a flat canvas, and only one color is uniform splotch on it. Therefore, I'm trying to make edges and raise parts more pronounced with lighter shades. You can use paper or plastic boards like a template and make sharp color transition. I use for shading airbrush with 0.2mm nozzle and highly diluted color. I usually add 1 part of a color and 3 or 4 parts of a thinner. This way you can make a smooth, blended color transition. This is the result after highlights. I know a good trick on how to paint rubber wheels. I'm cutting out precise template and carefully apply them on the wheels. Then I'm spraying over rubber shades. Okay, this is dull and not super fast. Faster is to dilute the acrylic color like Vallejo or Revell Aqua and paint the rubber with a paintbrush, assuming that you have a steady hands, otherwise the masking template is better. The paintbrush is also great for small details on the tank body. I am painting bolts and rivets with lighter shades to make them more pronounced. There are some water slide decals, so I'm spraying the clear varnish over the whole surface and 2 layers under them. And after setting decals, 2 layers over. That is because they are relatively thick. You can see how pronounced decals edges are, therefore I am sanding down top clear varnish layers to make them more uniform. I bought white decals sheet for printing my own decals, but I usually use it for white strips because it is easier than masking or hand painting. Okay, the decals are on the model, so the last step is weathering and more shading. I have some pre-diluted enamel washes from AK for desert camouflages, so I decided to use them instead of oil paints. The reason is to create some dirt and deep shading. If you dilute the wash with an enamel thinner and spread it over the surface, then you can slightly change the shade. The pre-diluted washes are good, but I still prefer ordinary oil paints, because I can mix any shade I want. The advantage of the oil paints is slow drying time and strong color pigment, so you can make a nice and strong shading only with a dry brush, so no need for thinner. This is the result after basic oil paint shading. It's time for minor sketches. I usually paint them on my 72 scale models with a paintbrush, but this time is surface relatively large, so I help myself with a sponge technique. Essential is to find optimal paint dilution. If the paint is too much sparse, it creates large dots. If too dense, it will dry fast. I am modifying and painting large sketches with a paintbrush. The sponge makes sketches more or less random, and only with a sharp paintbrush you can modify them to the final needed result. The kit contains rubber tantracks. They are not nice as a metal or plastic ones, and the paint has problem adhering to them. In quarantine I didn't have access to extra parts, thus I was forced to use them. I cleaned them with a soapy water, and now I'm spraying black primer. Okay, they are not so horrible after the silver abraded effect. I mixed enamel color with a thinner and applied it unevenly to each link. I have lovely iron pigment powder, which makes the abraded look even more realistic. It is usually a nightmare to glue rubber, but if you make the rubber surface rougher, then flexible superglue can create a relatively strong bond. Great, I can now cover all the previous work on the tracks with a side armor. It's payoff. One of the last steps is to paint the side armor. I start with leaks or stains. I am using burnt umber oil paint and blending it with a white spirit. Something is still missing on the side armor. I think some splatters and scratches could be handsome. I mixed enamel color with a thinner again. I am doing the final effect with a toothpick and cheap synthetic paintbrush. You can see that you do not need for your models tons of weathering products, and instead you can use only a few oil paints, 2 or 3 cheap enamel colors, and thinner. Some dots are large and ugly, but that is the advantage of enamel colors. I can wipe it out with the enamel thinner. It is my third 35 scale tank, so I'm quite pleased with it. I know, I didn't make a lot of modifications as usual, but I have in the progress new highly modified models, so I will do something more detailed soon. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and test some techniques on your own. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Here is the presentation of the finished model.